The shocking truth behind a Hendrickson extension has been revealed. We're going to break down the details of what the contract for this year means and why it was actually a big benefit for the Bengals themselves and beyond this 2025 season. Welcome to the jungle. This is Isaac Coffman with Bengals Digest. Happy to see all you Bengals fans. Hope you're having a terrific day. We are so close to week 1. The season is almost here. If you want to be up to date with all of the breaking news, all of the rumors, the notes, those types of things, make sure you smash that subscribe so you'll be in the know and join the community. We want to hear your voice, hear your thoughts on the Bengals going into the season. There's lots of predictions out there. We want to hear some of yours. Well, Trey Hendrickson was a big part of this offseason with all the drama, with all the talks of the contracts back and forth. 11 days out, Hendrickson agreed to a contract that would give him a pay increase around $14 million. That has just been all over the headlines. We're done moving forward with that. We've heard enough about it, right? However, it is important to note the details about the contract because it has major implications for the Bengals, not just this season, but also beyond, and what it can mean for Hendrickson with the Bengals. So the first thing to note about this situation with Hendrickson, with the contract talks, was there was a back and forth type of discussion of not just a 1 year, but 3 years. And it just got to the point where it was not going to get to that point. It became what we know from the 1 year, about $14 million pay raise to Hendrickson. And what's interesting about this contract is we heard about the pay increase, right? But what does that mean for the Bengals going into this year? Well, there was new details that came out recently, and it's really interesting, I think, because what the Bengals, not what they didn't do, but what they can still do this year. They have weaknesses on defense. They have, you can argue, still weaknesses on that offensive line. We'll get into more about Dalton Risner and those types of things. But the Bengals can still add to an already busy offseason, signing Jamar Chase, signing Higgins, getting Gesicki back, all 2 extensions. Those were big. Those were crucial to get those guys back. They were the playmakers on offense. But now you get Hendrickson back in-house. He was under contract this year, but threatening to sit out. So they got that worked out. And the thought is, well, they just paid him the $14 million. So that must have been a big cap hit. Well, not necessarily. Actually, details have come out that because of the way it was structured, because of giving it a void year, actually, the cap hit is now going to sit around $3 million. Very interesting. This was coming from Field Yates. He reported on this of how putting that voided year actually opened the opportunity up for the Bengals. Keep in mind, the Bengals have a cap space before this at $28 million. So what does that mean? That's huge. You're talking injuries happen throughout the year. You're talking guys, maybe they don't play up to their production. That just happened with Lucas Patrick at right guard. And seeing him not progress, he's also now dealing with an injury. So what do the Bengals do? They go out and secure a guy like Dalton Risner. So that was a big move they could make. And even if they didn't have that much less of a cap hit, I'm sure they would have signed him. My hunch is that they were waiting for cut down day. If there was other teams that potentially cut an extra lineman, Dalton Risner was kind of that slam dunk for him, though. He was the best offensive lineman still on the free agent market. So that's what's really interesting and fascinating to me. The Bengals might not be done. They may just be getting started with this, especially given that there are still those weaknesses. That you're talking about Dalton Risner is kind of helping them at that right guard position. Hopefully he will get ready, because the only thing I would knock is they didn't sign him sooner. He potentially might not be on the week 1 active roster because they're going to need to get him up to speed. Would love to see him on that week 1. Maybe it's still possible. I'm just kind of not hold my breath, I guess, to see if he's going to be really starting. Maybe it was week 2. I'm thinking that could be potential. But you have guys that are still out there on the market. You have Justin Simmons, a safety, that can give you that help. Safety is a weak spot, at least in the recent years for the Bengals since Jesse Bates departed. So do you go out and sign a guy like him? Do you go after a guy like Zadarius Smith? a guy that can be paired with Hendrickson. I don't know. That's something that you got to consider. Is it worth it? Because again, they've got the cap space. That's one thing you can look at the Bengals. They have been very protective of that cap space, making sure that the contracts they sign don't take hits. And that's for this year. A lot of teams sometimes they'll have that space planned out in years in advance. But I guess you can look at it as kind of like a blessing in disguise if you want to look at it from that angle, because originally the contract that was in talks was going to be a 3-year, $95 million to Hendrickson. Now, it might have still been the same, because there is rumor that the reason Hendrickson turned this deal down, he was saying how he wanted long-term security, was there was no guarantees after the first year. Not much different than what you're seeing with this contract this year, because if there was no guarantees beyond, the Bengals could just cut bait. If, let's say, Hendrickson had a down year and they decided not to honor that contract, there's no guarantees. That's what Hendrickson was really objecting to. I think the $95 million is where he wanted to be at. You're averaging well over that $30 million per year over the 3 years, but they were just not there with the guarantees. So that kind of makes sense. But despite one's looking at it of, well, now what's going to happen next? What is the long term going to happen with Hendrickson? Well, they got him for this year, of course, but going into next year, they could very well tag him, because along with that, going back to what was reported on, they actually showed that the deal did not have a no tag clause, and Hendrickson agreed to that. So I know what you're thinking. Hendrickson held out, even though he agreed to the contract this year. Maybe he protests. You saw that with a lot of players. Higgins is one that comes to mind, but there's been other players across the league. You get the sense that the franchise tag is something players don't like, but that's what we're looking at. That's probably what the Bengals are doing. They get Hendrickson for this year, and you can see how it goes. If he does not have any down in his production, if he's still at a high level, you could turn around and put the franchise tag on him, and you have the cap space to do it. All the while, this year, you only take that $3 million cap hit. That's just what's fascinating about this whole ordeal. You make Hendrickson happy for this year, and they could very well go their separate ways. Maybe the Bengals decide not to tag him, whether it's due to a down year, or they decide they don't want to take that type of a cap hit. They certainly could do it next year, but they could decide they don't want to. But even for this year, they're set up very well. I think that's something they learned from last year. Injuries to Dax Hill, DJ Ivy, those types of guys in the defense. Do you go out and get a guy on the market? I'm thinking that's what their logic on this is. It's hard to say with the Bengals. Sometimes they do the obvious. Sometimes they go the ultra safe route. They've shown they've taken some risks, and that sometimes they don't. But still fascinating nonetheless. I think this is really interesting. Look for the Bengals to possibly add another player or two to address some of those glaring weaknesses that we've been seeing, that we've been talking about, especially when it comes to that defense. I think the defense is going to be, again, under the microscope this year. Hendrickson is at least going to be on the roster. That wasn't really maybe a big question mark, but again, he was threatening to sit out. At least you would lose him for however long it was going to be that he would sit out for. Now you don't have that problem. But the defense is still going to be under the question. Do you, again, go out and get another guy? Stay tuned. I would not be shocked if they make some kind of splash here soon. But we want to hear from you guys. What do you think of this contract? The way it's structured, the way the Bengals are playing it safe, they're making sure they have a lot of cap space. Do you think they're going to go out and secure some kind of big name, some guy on defense potentially, maybe even offensive line? Who knows? We could see it happen, right? Voice your comments below. We want to hear from you guys. And again, if you have not already, be sure you're subscribed by smashing that subscribe button so you'll be all up to date when our new videos drop. So that's going to do it for now, guys. As we say, Uday.